My child. Pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was not meant to pass you by. Something has been unfolding behind the silence, something your eyes could not see and your heart could only sense. Do not move away from this message too quickly. There is a truth waiting for you here, and once it is revealed, you will understand why your soul has felt restless, why certain memories have returned without warning, and why the person connected to your heart has been carrying an emotion too heavy to hide. Your soulmate tested your honesty. They did not tell you. They did not ask you directly. They did not stand before you and admit what they were trying to discover. Instead, they created a quiet moment, a subtle situation, a hidden test that seemed ordinary on the surface. They wanted to know whether your heart was truly as sincere as they hoped. They wanted to know whether your words were real when no reward was waiting for you, when no one was watching, and when you believed your decision would never reach them. And what they found out caused them to break down in tears. But listen carefully, because those tears did not come from betrayal. They did not come because you failed. They came because you revealed something they were terrified no longer existed in this world. You showed them a kind of honesty they had secretly stopped believing in. You answered a question they had been carrying for far longer than you realize, and the answer shook them so deeply that they could no longer keep their emotions under control. Do not skip this moment, because the way they tested you will surprise you, but the reason behind that test will reveal something even greater. For some time, your soulmate has been living between hope and fear. One part of them believed in you completely. That part remembered your kindness, your patience, your way of speaking with sincerity even when life made you tired. That part felt safe when thinking of you. But another part of them carried old wounds, unanswered questions, and memories of people who once promised loyalty but disappeared when loyalty became inconvenient. They wanted to trust you, but trust had become frightening. They had learned that beautiful words could be spoken without truth behind them. They had watched people make promises in warm moments and abandon those promises in difficult ones. They had seen affection turn into distance, certainty turn into confusion, and closeness turn into silence. So even though their heart kept moving toward you, their fear kept pulling them back. They began asking themselves questions they never wanted to admit. Would you still be honest if honesty cost you something? Would you still protect their heart if they were not there to see it? Would you speak the truth if a lie could make your life easier? Would you remain loyal to what you felt, or would you choose the approval of someone else? These questions did not rise because they believed you were false. They rose because you mattered too much. The deeper their feelings became, the more terrifying the possibility of losing you felt. They were not testing a stranger. They were testing the person who had become dangerous to their emotional walls. Yes, dangerous. Not because you intended harm, but because your presence had begun to undo the defenses they had spent years building. There was something about you they could not dismiss. They tried to call it curiosity. They tried to convince themselves it was temporary. They tried to remain calm, rational, and distant. But whenever they imagined walking away completely, something inside them resisted. Your energy had already reached a place in them that logic could not command. And that is when they made a decision. They needed proof. Not public proof. Not dramatic proof. Not a grand declaration designed to impress them. They wanted a private truth. They wanted to see who you were when you believed your actions would remain unseen. So they allowed a situation to reach you. It may have come through a conversation, a message, a mutual connection, or a detail placed carefully in your path. It may have looked like an innocent question. It may have appeared to be a simple opportunity to explain yourself. It may even have seemed as though someone was trying to tempt you into speaking carelessly. But your soulmate was watching the outcome. Not necessarily with their own eyes. They may have been waiting for someone to report what you said. They may have returned to a conversation later and asked what happened. They may have used a person they trusted, or they may simply have allowed information to travel naturally, knowing that the truth would eventually return to them. And it did. At first, they expected uncertainty. They prepared themselves for disappointment before the answer arrived. They told themselves not to hope too much. They tried to lower their expectations so the truth could not hurt them. But when they heard what you had said, they became still. You had been given an opportunity to exaggerate, but you did not. You had been given a chance to make yourself look better, but you remained truthful. You could have hidden what you felt, but you did not disrespect the connection. You could have spoken carelessly about them, but instead, you protected something private. You could have chosen the easy answer, yet you chose the honest one. And the most powerful part was this: you did not know they would ever hear about it. That realization broke something open inside them. Stay until the end, because what happened next was not just an emotional reaction. It was the collapse of a fear they had carried for years. When they first received the truth, they did not immediately cry. They became quiet. They read the words again, or replayed the conversation in their mind. They asked for confirmation. They wanted to be certain nothing had been misunderstood. Are you sure that is what they said? That question came from disbelief. They had expected you to protect your image. Instead, you protected the truth. They had expected you to choose convenience. Instead, you chose integrity. They had expected uncertainty. Instead, they discovered consistency. For a few moments, they tried to remain composed. They nodded. They acted as though the information had not deeply affected them. They may even have changed the subject or walked away so no one could see what was happening within them. But once they were alone, the emotion arrived. The room became quiet. Their thoughts became loud. They sat with the truth of what you had done, and suddenly every wall inside them felt weaker. The tears began slowly. One tear escaped before they could stop it. Then another. And soon, they were no longer crying only because you had passed a secret test. They were crying because your honesty forced them to confront the possibility that they had misjudged you. They remembered every time they had doubted your intentions. They remembered the moments they had pulled away without explaining why. They remembered the conversations they had delayed, the feelings they had hidden, and the chances they had almost allowed fear to destroy. And now they were facing a painful truth: you had been more genuine than they allowed themselves to believe. My child, Their tears carried relief, regret, and love all at once. Relief, because they finally saw evidence that your heart was not playing with theirs. Regret, because they knew their fear may have caused you confusion. Love, because in that hidden moment of honesty, you became even more precious to them. But something else happened. As they cried, they remembered a promise they once made to themselves. Long before you became important to them, they decided they would never again give their full heart without certainty. They promised themselves they would remain guarded, observant, and careful. They believed control would protect them from pain. Then you arrived. You did not force their walls down. You did not demand trust. You simply continued being yourself. And without realizing it, you made their old promise impossible to keep. Your honesty was not loud, but it reached deeper than any performance could. They had tested you to protect themselves, but your response revealed that the person they were truly fighting was not you. They were fighting their own fear of happiness. This is where the story becomes more intense. Because after the tears came a decision. They knew they could no longer remain in the same emotional position. They could not keep expecting you to prove yourself while revealing nothing in return. They could not continue watching from a distance while hoping you would somehow understand everything they were too afraid to say. They realized the test had not only exposed your honesty. It had exposed their silence. And that frightened them. They began to ask themselves, what if I waited too long? What if my fear made them believe I did not care? What if someone else sees their value before I have the courage to speak? That final question caused their heart to race. Because somewhere close to this situation, another presence has been noticed. It may not be a serious romantic connection, but your soulmate has become aware that you are not invisible. They know others can see your goodness. They know someone else could appreciate the honesty they secretly tested. And suddenly, the time they believed they had no longer felt unlimited. Do not leave this message now. Something huge is waiting for you, because the next part of this revelation is connected to a conversation they overheard after the test was complete. Someone said something about you. It was not planned. It was not spoken for dramatic effect. It happened naturally, and your soulmate was not prepared for how deeply it would affect them. The person speaking may have known you personally, or they may have only observed the way you carry yourself. They described you as someone who does not easily betray what matters. They said that when you care deeply. They said you may remain quiet, but your silence should never be mistaken for emptiness. Your soulmate listened without interrupting. Then the person said something that stayed in their mind. Someone like that will not wait forever to be understood. Those words struck them like a bell in a silent room. Not because they believed you were leaving that exact moment, but because they realized love cannot survive forever on hidden tests and unspoken feelings. They understood that your honesty deserved honesty in return. That night, they could not rest. They imagined what it would feel like to finally tell you the truth. They formed sentences in their mind, then erased them. They opened a message, typed a few words, and stopped. They wondered how much to reveal. They feared sounding too emotional. They feared saying too little. But the greatest fear was no longer rejection. The greatest fear was losing the opportunity altogether. My child, heaven has seen the struggle within them. This is not a story of someone playing with your emotions. This is the story of someone discovering that their protective habits have become a prison. They wanted certainty before taking a step, but love rarely offers complete certainty. It offers moments of truth, and asks whether the heart is brave enough to respond. You gave them one of those moments. Now they are being asked to give one back. And yet, there is still something you do not know about the test. The situation they created was connected to a specific concern. They were not testing every part of your character. They were searching for the answer to one painful question. They wanted to know whether you had spoken about them with respect when they were absent. This mattered because someone from their past had once exposed their private feelings and turned them into a topic of conversation. Something deeply personal had been shared without permission. Their vulnerability became entertainment for people who did not understand how much courage it had taken for them to open up. Since that moment, they have feared being emotionally exposed. When they began caring for you, that fear returned. They wondered whether you had told others about the connection. They wondered whether their feelings were safe with you. They wondered whether private moments had remained private. So they allowed someone to ask you about them. The question may have sounded casual. It may have invited gossip. It may have offered you the chance to reveal details that would make you feel important. But you did not take the bait. You answered carefully. You may have said that some things were not yours to discuss. You may have defended their character without exposing their vulnerability. You may have changed the direction of the conversation rather than allowing their personal life to become public. And when those details reached your soulmate, they covered their face and cried. Because you had protected them in a room they were not standing in. You had respected their heart without being asked. You had guarded something they feared would be mishandled. That was the moment they realized your honesty was not only about telling the truth. It was also about knowing which truths were sacred. There are truths that should be spoken. There are truths that should be protected. You understood the difference. And for your soulmate, that difference changed everything. But now guilt has entered their heart. They feel guilty for testing you. They wonder whether the test itself was unfair. They know that if you discovered what they had done, you might feel hurt that they did not simply ask you directly. This guilt has become the final barrier between them and the conversation they want to have. They want to confess everything. They want to admit that they were afraid. They want to tell you what they heard and how it affected them. They want to explain why the tears came. But they also know that confession could expose the depth of their feelings. Once they tell you why your honesty mattered so much, they can no longer pretend you are ordinary to them. That is the risk they are now considering. Stay close to these words, because the emotional turning point has already begun. They recently looked at something connected to you, a photograph, an old message, a memory, or a simple reminder of a conversation. This time, they did not look at it with suspicion. They looked at it with tenderness. Their thoughts shifted. Instead of asking, "Can I trust this person?" They began asking, "How do I show them they can trust me?" This is a major change. Their heart is moving from observation to participation. They no longer want to stand outside the connection, measuring every possibility. They want to step inside it. They want to become honest about what they feel, even if their voice shakes. But before they do, they are planning one more action. Not another test. A revelation. There is something they have been hiding about the beginning of their feelings for you. You may believe their interest developed slowly, but the truth is that one particular moment changed the way they saw you. It happened earlier than you think. You did something small. You may not even remember it. You spoke kindly when you had no reason to impress anyone. You showed patience in a moment when others would have become careless. You noticed something about them that most people overlooked. From that day, they began watching you differently. They tried to dismiss it. They told themselves it meant nothing. But your presence began appearing in their thoughts at unexpected times. A song reminded them of you. A place made them wonder what it would be like to stand there with you. A difficult day made them wish they could hear your voice. They were already emotionally connected before they admitted it. The secret test came later because their feelings had become too strong to ignore. Now they are holding two confessions. The first is that they tested your honesty. The second is that they have cared about you far longer than you know. And there is a third truth beneath both of them. A truth they have not yet said aloud, even to themselves. They are beginning to believe you may be the person they once prayed for during one of the loneliest seasons of their life. That possibility terrifies them because it gives meaning to everything. The timing, the distance, the emotional pull, the repeated return of your name to their thoughts. It would mean this connection is not something they can casually forget. It would mean their next choice matters. And their next choice is closer than you think. They have already drafted the beginning of a message. It is not complete. They have rewritten the first sentence several times. Each version reveals a little more than the one before it. The first version was simple. "I need to tell you something." They deleted it. The second was more honest. "I owe you the truth about something I did." They stared at it for a long time. Then they wrote the sentence that caused their hands to tremble. "I tested your honesty because I was afraid to trust you, and what I discovered made me realize I may have been unfair to the one person who never gave me a reason to doubt." They did not send it. Not yet. Because before pressing send, they learned one more thing about you. Something unexpected. Something that made them rise from where they were sitting, read the words twice, and whisper your name through tears. And what they discovered may force them to contact you sooner than either of you imagined.